My guest today is Kevin Sabet. Kevin is currently the president and CEO of the Foundation for Drug Policy Solutions and SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, two nonprofit organizations he founded with Congressman Patrick Kennedy. His newly released book, One Nation Under the Influence, was published by Polity in November 2025. He regularly publishes op-eds, and his work has been seen in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and other publications. He's also a regular columnist for Newsweek. An affiliate of the Institution for Social and Policy Studies in the Medical School at Yale University, Kevin has studied, researched, written about, and implemented drug policy for over 25 years. He's the only person who's been appointed by both Republican and Democratic administrations to work at the White House Drug Office. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Bill. It's a pleasure.
That was the short version. We could use up all our time doing the long version of all the stuff you've done.
Let's not do that.
Let me go back. Let me go back and ask you something that I noticed in trying to do a little homework. You've been involved with drug policy since high school.
Yeah, really, since I think middle school, actually, about at grade eight. It's pretty crazy. I never thought it would become a profession.
How? What brought that about?
Well, I grew up in a sort of upper middle class community in Southern California where drugs were seen as not our problem. They were seen as, happening over there, not over here. And I was around grade eighth grade. I was sort of voted. I didn't run, but I was voted a handful of students to basically be peer listeners for kids that just wanted to talk. Our friends that wanted to talk in confidence. And so, as when I was doing that, I started listening to people and hearing that drugs were a big issue in a lot of people's lives, and a lot of mixed messages about alcohol as well as marijuana, cigarettes. Then, of course, and it just got me curious about the issue. And then there was a tragedy regarding marijuana, a car crash in my school that kind of woke me up a little bit as well. And then, or I should say, someone I knew, not in the school. And then, I saw that this was a growing issue, and it was something that I was very interested in, and also, something I could do as a sort of an after-school program in clubs and things like that. But the more research I did, the more I saw this was a growing issue. And then, when I was in high school, our state was going to be the first one to vote on medical marijuana, and I was open to the idea, having cancer in my family, and open to obviously compassion. At the time, of course, we didn't have a functional AIDS cure like we do now, and so that was it was an issue for the AIDS community, and I was very open to it. And then I started reading the details, and I started reading that it was really about the full-blown legalization of marijuana. It didn't really have much to do with medicine the way it was written. And that just got me down a rabbit hole, frankly. And I started reading about, who's trying to legitimize, normalize drug use? Why are they doing it? What tactics are they using? And then I went to college. I went to Berkeley and started doing activism there. And the White House noticed me. I went into the White House for the Clinton administration when I was 20 years old, at the last year of the Clinton administration. And then the
Wow.
rest is history.
Um. So you have all this involvement. Did you ever experiment at all in any way, even with the slightest puff of a cigarette when you were a kid?
I had no inclination to do so. Maybe I just tried to do plenty of other things, but not that. And I never had alcohol, never saw alcohol in my house. My parents don't drink, and so that none of that was part of my. Whereas, I mean, a lot of people I work for, of course, work with and work for, they have stories of recovery, and they come out this
Yes.
very personal issue, and that was not the case for me.
Yeah. I had I was reviewing. I listened to another interview with somebody in harm reduction because I know you've got some opinions on harm reduction.
Yeah.
And one of the things she was talking about is, you know, how do we tell little kids not to drink from the bottle under the sink and stuff? And it got me
Right.
thinking. Got me thinking. I said, when was the first time I ever had any experience with a substance? Not like I.
Hmm.
And I realized There was a time that I wandered out to a garage and had some weed killer with arsenic in it.
Hmm.
Most people don't mess around with that. And that I tried when I was about 5. My grandmother was a smoker, and she left a lit cigarette in an ashtray, and I swallowed some smoke and got pretty sick. And
Hmm.
but it was, that counts as experimenting with the substance.
Hmm. Sure. No, I never had any of those experiences.
Yeah, well, I had a couple. Um, so which came first? Well, keep the story going. You and Patrick Kennedy,
Yeah.
and
So then I was literally at Berkeley at the time, and there was it was this was a time when we was kind of a big ecstasy MDMA mini epidemic, if you remember, in the late 90s, early 2000s, with the rave culture and people dying from taking ecstasy and etc. And we started going to clubs and raves, my friends and I, with postcards from the NIH showing what actually happens to your brain when you're under the influence of this drug. And that got a lot of, attention. And we weren't doing it for the attention. We were doing it because we wanted a realistic way to show people what was going on rather than just say, don't do it or it's bad for you. We wanted to show them. So we did that, and then what we ended up doing. So then I got contacted with the White House, and then again, I didn't think this would be a profession. I could never imagine it would be a profession, and I wanted to go to law school and kind of go there. And then I was offered a scholarship to go to Oxford in the UK. And then 9/11 happened a month before we left, and for the UK, and so we were the first, cohort of people. Chelsea Clinton was there. It was kind of a, Wes Moore, the current governor of Maryland, was a Rhodes Scholar. The same year I was a Marshall Scholar. Lots of interesting people I got to meet, and so I went over to Oxford as that first post 9/11 cohort, which was a very eerie thing. And I looked around and I saw a lot of people my age. They were going to war. They were shipping out to the Middle East, and that's the way they were serving their country. And I felt, I don't know, there was a guilt, or there was a, should I be going to sort of, I don't know, this very posh place where have afternoon tea, and we would dress up in our tuxedo for dinner, and it sort of seemed a little bit of a disconnect. And uh, while I was kind of processing these things and thinking about what I should be doing, I got a phone call from the White House. This time it was from the Bush administration. And they said, we know you worked for Clinton for a little bit. It's okay. We'd like you to come and be a senior speechwriter. And, I saw that as a way to serve my country, actually. So I left Oxford early, much earlier than before my scholarship was ending. And I thought maybe I'll come back, maybe I won't, I don't know. And I went to Washington. Most people thought I was never going to come back. And I thought I was open to either thing. Went to Washington for about a year and a month or two, and enjoyed it, but also realized that I did not want to be in government. That government was too slow. You couldn't think outside the box. You had to parrot talking points. You couldn't think for yourself. I was frustrated with a lot of things in policy. So I said, you know what? I am going to go back to Oxford. So during the hype of the election year, and the different friends of mine were working for different campaigns and getting plum jobs and for governors and administrators, I left the country again, and I went back to Oxford to get my PhD, because I thought I really do want to dig into drug policy. I don't want to go to law school anymore. I want to dig in. I did that. So I got my PhD. Then I thought, what am I going to do with it? And I thought I'd go into academia, but then I got a taste of what that was like, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I didn't want to be in an ivory tower. I didn't want to be, sort of disconnected from real world policy work that I loved. And I didn't think I wanted to go back to government. So I was very torn. Ended up meeting a fabulous woman, getting married. She was getting her PhD at Harvard. So we moved to Cambridge. And I sort of, that first year in Cambridge, wandering around Harvard Square, figuring out what I'm doing. I was doing some consulting here and there, but I was thinking about, what am I going to do? And then Obama was elected, and the country was, if you can believe it, you remember, unified around that election, and was very united in many ways. And I thought, you know what, I'll write an op-ed, I'll write an opinion piece for the incoming administration about what I think they should do, how they can reorient drug policy, or what should they take from the past that works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing. So I ended up publishing it in the Seattle Times. That week, the president nominated the police chief of the city of Seattle, Gil Kurlikowski, as the new drug czar. And I'm sure you know Gil, great person, amazing person. And he saw that, what I read. He said, I'd love to pick your brain for 15 minutes. He was very humble and is very humble guy, very humble guy. And we met for 3 hours, and he essentially offered me a job. And I thought, oh no, I don't want to go back to government. I didn't like government before. And also, I just got married. I'm living in Cambridge. It's a great life up here, student kind of faculty type life, university life, I should say, and met a lot of good friends. Now I got to go to Washington, which I don't particularly like Washington, to be honest with you. Didn't really want to go. I didn't really want to go to Washington, and but it was really an opportunity I couldn't say no to. So I started flying there every week and flying back for the weekend, and I did that for 2.5 years.
Oh
And while I
my.
was there, I was the lead for the marijuana issue and other issues too, criminal justice, harm reduction issues, international. Really learned from great people. I was there during the dream team, I would say, of Tom McClellan, Keith Humphreys, Gil Kurlikowski. It was a really great group of people. Regina LaBelle, many other people, Rich Baum. And I had a much more enjoyable time that time than I had in the previous two, probably because I was more senior. And but then after almost 3 years, I had a slight health issue. It was basically an appendicitis that wasn't caught early that put me in the hospital for a couple of weeks, actually. And that was a little scary. And then I was sick of doing the commute, wanted to think about starting a family. And I felt like I served my time. And again, I didn't know what I was going to do next. All I knew is that I saw this freight train coming forward of marijuana commercialization, normalization, and legalization. And we had fended it off in the administration in the early 2010s, but it was coming very quickly. And I thought, what can I do? And I helped with the Colorado campaign, didn't do much up, obviously, and Washington, because they both lost. But I really saw that the side fighting legalization was not as strategic. It was often run by paid, advisors who only cared about it because they got a check for 3 months, running a campaign. And there wasn't a lot of heart. There was a lot of the veterans in the anti-drug movement who were tired and didn't have the funds and the wherewithal to move toward in the 21st century with this issue. And I thought, you know what, I got to start something new. And I got a lot of people supported, but a lot of people said, why are you doing this? It's a bad idea for many different reasons. But I felt like I had to start something new. So I started SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, brought on Patrick Kennedy, who I called and I said, please do this with me. I can't do it without you. He unhesitatingly agreed.
Had you
And
ever
we
met
got,
him before?
I had met him before in the administration when we were working on the ACA with Obamacare and allowing, getting people with mental illness and addiction covered under the ACA. I had worked with him on that. And he was a congressman and he was in recovery, of course.
Yes.
And anyway, he full, came on board fully. David Frum saw me on television. I did an MSNBC hit with the current CBS news anchor, Tony DeCopel, actually, who's a great guy. And I did a MSNBC hit for an hour right after Colorado and Washington legalized marijuana. And I got a call from David Frum and he said, you need to turn these ideas into an actual force, into an organization, a movement. And that pushed me, and I got Patrick, and we got a scientific advisory board, and we launched in January of 2013, which is essentially when Colorado was about to implement legalization, just after they voted to legalize it. We launched in Denver, Colorado, actually at the Denver Press Club. And we had no money, no strategy, no staff, no anything. And, 13 years later, I'm just so proud of what we've been able to do.
And somewhere in there, I noticed he's emeritus. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. On your board, Mitchell Rosenthal.
Mitch was a mentor of mine, a dear, dear friend that I loved. I'd love to. How did you know me? I mean, obviously New York. Who doesn't know Mitch? But how did
Amy,
you know Mitch?
Amy Singer, who worked with him,
Oh yeah,
read read some of the stuff that I've written, and said, "I'd like to introduce you to Mitch." And we had a couple breakfasts at the University Club or
At
something
the
like that.
University Club. Oh yeah, that's absolutely where you went. That was he was the fixture.
And we talked, and we talked about some things, and then um, I followed him when he was kept writing his stuff, and then of course, unfortunately, he died.
I loved Mitch dearly. And he did so much for me. He was so kind, so open, so warm. In fact, we launched the sister organization of SAM. It's called the Foundation for Drug Policy Solutions
Aha!
with Mitch, with him at the University Club in 2022, right before he passed. And um, just a really a one of a kind person. The impact he had on our field in terms of not only ideas and what he did with Phoenix House, but the people that he interacted with, the A-list actors, media personalities. I mean, he looked like an actor, so he blended in with them. But the people that he raised awareness, I can't think of anybody before or since that has had the that kind of impact on A-listers on this issue. Really incredible. I was so lucky to know him.
That's interesting. I'm also interested because it was we have one thing in common, and I don't mean to equate us entirely. I got to be careful here, but it was the first. I wrote an op-ed after my son died, and I wrote an op-ed about our family and our reaction to his death after an accidental heroin overdose. And I was contacted by different places, and one of which being Phoenix House, not by Mitch, but
Mm,
by the people
mm,
running it then. But you obviously experienced the same thing I have in a smaller way. How one article or one thing leads to another, and
yes.
it keeps expanding. And certainly now, I mean, here we are. You and I are talking now, and that's because there are people that we've come across in common.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great people. Well, your reputation is incredible in the work that you've done to raise awareness and turning, your unspeakable tragedy into action. I got to be honest with you. I have a 6-year-old daughter. My mind can't get around, literally cannot envision anything close to what you and hundreds of thousands of people have experienced. And then to then turn that into something positive into action. I can't fathom it. And I really, my hat's off to you. It's incredible. You know, it's so important that we have stories because we have the facts. I mean, we know what works. We know what's going on. We know who uses. I mean, we actually know a lot more than people give society credit for on this issue. The issue is though we don't implement it. We don't have the will to actually implement what works. And stories like yours and hearing about real experiences, that's what changes minds and the dial, not a PhD, not a, lengthy National Academies report. That isn't what changes. What changes are the stories. And that's why it's so important to hear from people, from you and others.
Well, the thing I always say is numbers numb empathy.
Yes,
So you
exactly.
can
Well, it's a way, Joseph Stalin said once, the death of 10,000 soldiers is a mere statistic. The death of one is an absolute tragedy. And that's really what we're seeing.
I'm going to read just a short little segment for you, if you don't mind.
Please, I'd love it.
We are faced with the difficult process of changing hearts and minds. That means talking to minds that have no heart, talking to hearts that have no mind, and talking to those who have neither but believe they have the best of both. It can be daunting. We must not back off. Um, that sound like anything you've come across in your.
Ye- Yes, it sounds like Teddy Roosevelt. It's, no, it's great. It's really, it's very, very important.
Um, let's move on. Let's move on to marijuana. I was originally maybe going to divide the hour, but I'm going to use our time. We'll use our time just the way it comes along here.
Sure, I like it.
Tell us a little more about Sam.
Well, we started SAM because, again, this false dichotomy that was out there that said you either had to legalize and commercialize marijuana or criminalize and lock people up. Now, the reality is we haven't locked people up for marijuana possession in decades, so that's not really the truth, although people think we have. That's one of the biggest urban myths out there is that, police spend all their time, if it's not legalized, arresting people just for marijuana and throwing them in prison. Um, but that is the dichotomy that's out there. And what we're saying is you don't have to do either of those things. We don't want to arrest people, give people records, but we also need to be very careful about, commercializing a drug that is 10 to 50 times stronger than it was at Woodstock. And what we're seeing now is that the marijuana industry, and this is what we've been warning about, has completely mimicked the tobacco industry in pushing for um, uh, uh, basically what I call addiction for profit, which is, of course, what the pharma industry did, what the alcohol industry does. And it's about getting the most number of people to use the strongest product as much as possible. And what we've seen with marijuana is just this huge, first of all, increase in the intensity of use, the daily users, almost 20 million Americans, probably more actually. And the level of concentration of that marijuana has just exponentially grown. So what we're trying to say is let's not legalize marijuana. We don't want to criminalize it, but let's not legalize it because by doing so, you are opening the door to this corporatization. I would call it corporate commercialization. And by the way, it doesn't end with marijuana. Those same companies are now doing the same thing with psychedelic drugs, MDMA, ecstasy, ketamine. I mean, the list goes on. It doesn't end with marijuana. But on the marijuana side, I think it's the most dangerous drug in America because it's the most misunderstood. And it's causing levels of psychosis and schizophrenia in ways that we've never seen before. And the risk factor is off the charts if you're a regular user. It's also causing a lot of other things like uncontrollable vomiting, heart attacks, diabetes. I mean, the studies that we now have, the list goes on and on and on. But my concern is that we need to really raise awareness about today's marijuana because I don't think people understand what it's doing.
And when you say today's marijuana, you mean marijuana that has been cultivated specifically for its THC content.
Yes, exactly. This is marijuana that's been genetically bred to increase the THC level, which is the active ingredient. That's what gets you high. I mean, there's hundreds of components in marijuana, but THC is what gets you high. And we've become better farmers. We're better at agriculture. And legalization has allowed companies to innovate. That's what you do when you're a legitimate company. You innovate, you look for new products. How do we get more people hooked? How do we get more people using? Um, and so now we have, these dabs and these waxes and these edibles, these things we never had before that are delivering the THC in a much more efficient, i.e., addictive way. And that's something I really worry about. And I think as a country, we're about to have a reckoning because this cannot go on. In fact, what the New York Times did earlier this week is the beginning of that reckoning, where they admitted they were wrong. And I'll never forget going into that editorial board meeting on 8th Avenue, basically being laughed out of the room 6 years ago. And now they've completely changed their tune. So they're still not fully, I think, guided on policy, but at least on the harms, they are now realizing that they made a big mistake by downplaying the harms.
One thing I notice is the role that advertising plays in just about anything, and not just in current times. You can go back 100 years. You can look at the advertising, and when we say advertising, I mean there's radio, there's TV, there's print ads, all that. But I also think of advertising as mouth to mouth.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
if you're doing a show on Broadway, if you've got a movie, you want to get good word of mouth. And
yes.
I'm sure that the drug people want to get good word of mouth about their
Oh,
product.
oh, absolutely. They've infiltrated Hollywood. They're everywhere. Business, major athletes, and even sports leagues that have totally gone the wrong way on this because of intense pressure from players who are being pushed to, be sponsored and promote their product. I mean, it's all working that way. And I think it's just ironic that it was the counterculture that started this whole thing of let's legalize marijuana, and yet it's the sort of mainstream corporatization that has taken over that entire process.
How do you how do you, Kevin, how do you learn about this stuff? Where do you go to get it, dig up information? Where do you go to?
Well, people, I mean, where I go is I listen to the latest researchers, but I also listen to the parents that are dealing with the nightmare, that are dealing with the psychosis and schizophrenia that has been, ravaging their own family, that has been hurting them. But I go to the National Academy of Sciences that has written. I go to the NIH. I go to many. There's so many different, publications now of people that are actually realizing that this is a problem, and I think there is a whole pushback by public opinion. We're seeing Gallup and other public opinion measures showing that people they're having buyer's remorse about the whole thing. And so where I get information is usually, the scientific, I read the journals, I read the articles, I see what's out there, but also the parents that are dealing with the nightmare, frankly. We have to listen to both. Anybody can, of course, go on our website, which is learnaboutsam.org. On the one hand, I'm proud that we are the best resource for marijuana on the internet. On the other hand, I'm ashamed that we are, because it shouldn't be us. It should be the government. I mean, the government should be giving information to people. And I think a lot of politicians have become very squirmy on this issue. They don't really know where to go on it.
Well, you mentioned before, you were talking about how sort of how slow government was. When you were first there as a young person, that you really did enjoy it because things didn't move along. There wasn't much happening. And yet the states, it's not the government, it's not the politicians, it's a vote
Yeah.
that puts us ahead of ourselves. So how do is there any way to reconcile?
Well, I think it's both. So in the beginning, it was these votes, which were these referendum that were put forward by, frankly, billionaires. I mean, it's been a couple of billionaires that have been pushing this. It's not like some grassroots movement that just built and built and built and sort of like giving $50 to the Bernie Sanders campaign. That's not how this happened. This happened because of basically three billionaires started it, and they started putting a ton of money in political advocacy. And like you said, they would make it, very, very. They changed the permission structure, so you could be a ordinary American who didn't use drugs, but vote for marijuana legalization because you were told it was the sensible thing to do to regulate it. We could get tax revenue. We could get rid of the black market. We could keep it away from kids. We could do it in a way that was responsible. So we'd have advertising limits and THC limits and sort of these things that they throw out there that never get implemented. And so reasonable people were talked into it. That's what happened. But that took like 40 years. I mean, it takes a long time. And so they were talked into it. And now, actually, over the last 2 years, no state has legalized marijuana. They failed at the referenda, but they've also failed at the legislature because a lot of, after the first 10 years of marijuana activism, they started turning to the legislature now because they were running out of states that people could vote and do referenda or whatnot. And that's also very expensive. And instead, they were going to politicians, and they did change the minds of many politicians. Because they made it sound like everybody wants this. It's so popular. How could you go against it? There's whole websites and PR campaigns designed around this idea that this is inevitable, that you have to be a crazy person. You have to be a flat earther to think that legalization isn't a good idea. And they've been very effective. And it all started, I had to say, with this term medical marijuana, because they took something that was never called medicine and they made it medicine, not through the FDA, not through the medical process, but through the popular vote process. And so all of a sudden, it was about a popularity contest, not about science. And so they changed the permission structure. Now, that doesn't mean there may not be medical therapeutic effects of the marijuana plant that we should study and we should have. There are, and we already have, frankly, some FDA medications based on it. That's fine. But they greatly confused the issue for the American people, made it sound like all marijuana use essentially was medical. And then that changed the permission structure of the average American to be okay with a drug that they may not have even used. And they did that so effectively that now they have so many more people using, so they're definitely okay with it. And I got to say, I do think we are beginning to turn the corner a little bit, though. And people are saying, wait a minute, this has gone too far, too fast. I smell it everywhere. I've heard about the issues with psychosis. it's becoming a nuisance. It's becoming a problem. We haven't gotten rid of the black market. That's for sure. We haven't regulated it safely. That's for sure. We haven't kept it away from kids. That's for sure. And instead, we now see secondhand smoke, etc. So I think there is the beginning of the backlash.
Um, did, are there people that come after you personally?
How long do you have?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's an ignorant
No,
question.
it's fine. No. I mean, yeah, this is, you know why they do, because this is a religion for people now. I mean, I've never seen a drug, including heroin, um, where people are protesting for their right to use it. It's something about marijuana. There's something so sinister about it that it makes you think it's okay, and it turns you into a convert, like a religion. So you don't listen to the science. You don't see that the world around you is falling apart. You're not fulfilling the things you could be doing. And obviously there are some people that use it and they're fine. And so again, they look at them and they say, well, they're okay, or they're a celebrity. Look, Bill Maher, he's a top celebrity and he uses it every day. In fact, he uses it on television. How bad can it be? So, or this athlete used it, or this other person uses it that I know that's successful. So people generalize based on the anecdotes as well. And the reality is, it becomes very, very personal. So they look at me and they say, well, you either are doing this because you're paid for by big pharma or big alcohol because they're worried about their sales, which is funny because we attack big pharma and big alcohol all the time. We say we don't want anything like them, but they say that anyway. Or they say, whatever, I'm making this up for private prison interests, which is ironic because, first of all, private prisons are not dealing with marijuana, but also I've never had anything to do with them. And I actually say we shouldn't put people in prison for marijuana. So it doesn't make any sense. But they find reason. They say, there must be some reason. And then they attack you very personally.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how would you go about, I'm a former teacher, so
Yeah,
I'm concerned, and I'm always a teacher. Um,
of course.
I'm concerned about how we educate kids. I've got 3 young granddaughters. How do we educate kids? How do we get a message across to them that marijuana is something that they should not be considering until they're much, much
Yeah.
older?
Well, I think one of the things we can do is take a page out of the anti-tobacco movement. And I actually wrote about that in my new book, One Nation Under the Influence, in terms of, um, you know, what can we do and what can we learn? And we can learn a lot from our experience with smoking. So, remember at a time, half of Americans were smoking regularly. It was everywhere. It was in restaurants, airplanes. I mean, Bill, if I tell anybody under 40 that we used to be able to smoke in airplanes, they think I'm making it up. They can't imagine that that was a real thing.
Yeah,
Or smoking sections in restaurants. They can't imagine that was a real thing. But what we did is we didn't attack the smoker. We didn't say you're a bad person for smoking and you should be ashamed of yourself. But what instead we did is we said, there is this industry that has tricked you. It has tricked your brain into thinking that this is okay. And it has been lobbying and doing everything it can do on the political side to push its agenda. And enough is enough. We have too many people dying and too many people who are affected by it. And we're going to pass smoke-free laws so you can't smoke in public. We're going to outlaw smoking basically anywhere and everywhere we can. We're going to have a massive anti-smoking campaign that leaves no doubt where the science is, where society is, where the right position is. And we did that as a country, and we drove smoking down to the now 3% of high school seniors are smoking. I mean, our high school students. That's incredible. We still have some work to do in certain populations. It's generally now an activity if you're in the lower income strata, so which is concerning. So there are things we need to do, but the bottom line is we turned this around relatively quickly, and I think we can use that as a model. And so what I would tell kids to answer your question isn't so. I don't lead with this is bad for your brain, it's going to cause schizophrenia if I'm talking to a 15-year-old, because a 15-year-old thinks they're invincible. They think they're completely invincible. That will not convince them.
Well, they are.
But what I lead, yeah, they are. But what I lead with is, you know what? Um, there is an organized corporate lobby that sees your brain as a dollar sign. And you have to decide if you want to be taken for a ride by them or not, because they want you as a lifelong customer and they will tell you anything that you will believe about the harmlessness of their product and how cool this product is. And so what I tell them, because kids have more access to information today than at any time in history, I say, look up the studies yourself. If you want to learn about the harms and how the marijuana industry is obfuscating the facts, look it up yourself. Don't just look at Reddit. Don't just look at Wikipedia. Look at the peer-reviewed studies in their totality. See the issue yourself. But also research how this industry wants to take your brain over. And that is actually usually pretty convincing, I found, because most young people don't want to be corporate shills.
Yeah. Well, what you're describing is talking with them as opposed to them.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
my feeling, it's important if there's a way to enlist them. These are the people that are going to be making the policy that's actually
Oh,
designing
yeah.
the policy that's actually going to make the change.
Yes.
At the pace we go, these are to say to these kids, guys, you may be a kid and somebody may be saying no to you now, but you've got to be smart enough when your time comes that you're not in the same boat that we're in.
Yeah. No, completely. That's completely correct.
And of course, not everybody likes to empower young people.
No, it's true.
Um, harm reduction.
Mhm.
It seems to me, in reading your book, you mentioned your book. This is the book we're talking about, everybody. I just have read it very carefully. It's got a lot of marks, a lot of
Thank you.
underlines, a lot of
That's
notes.
great. Love it.
Um, one of the things that struck me was the what you describe. I don't know whether you use the words directly, but there's polarization, there's opposition, there's the pendulum is swings from one side to the other, but
Mm.
finding middle ground on a lot of these
Yeah.
issues, or finding sensible ground. If it may not necessarily be exactly in the middle.
Yeah.
And one of the things it seems like that I pick up from you is that the definition of harm reduction or what harm reduction is has been skewed and skewed in
Hmm.
a way, at least in your opinion, skewed in a way that is harmful rather than harm reduction.
Yeah, no, it's turning into harm promotion. And we don't want harm reduction to turn into harm promotion. Harm reduction, as I talk about in the book, is a sensible intervention in a particular circumstance. And it was pioneered at the time when we had no cure for HIV, so no functional medications, and AIDS was a death sentence, and you had a lot of injection drug users, and before the real period of methamphetamine. I mean, it was a very different time, and but it was a way to reach people you could not normally get to, keep them alive until you can get them treatment. What that has morphed into is that the legalization group, very smart, the lobby in the early 90s, seized on that and said, this is a way to promote safe drug use, because you're essentially not telling people not to use. You're saying use it more safely. So you're admitting you can use drugs safely. And we want to actually make steps towards harm reduction throughout the spectrum of prevention, early intervention, treatment, recovery, law enforcement. I mean, we want to paint harm reduction, a very broad picture of harm reduction. And that essentially will lead us towards legalization. So they started doing that. So they come up with these ideas like the consumption rooms, where you have a quote unquote safe place to use drugs. And if you overdose, they'll revive you. Or you come up with something in Canada that they've been using to their detriment called quote unquote safe supply, which is that let's make it safer for fentanyl users to use opioids. And we're going to give them a regulated opioid pill an addictive pill like a hydromorphone, Dilaudid, so that they use that instead of fentanyl, which might just kill them the first time they take it. And it's there's so many fallacies, I think, underpinning that. One of which is that there's any safe way to use any drug, but the other fallacy is that people who are so addicted would want to use hydromorphone. Why? And the question is, well, why wouldn't they? Could kill them? No, they definitely would. For the same reason people knowing smoking kills them have been smoking for so long and continue to do so. Your brain has changed. You are addicted, and you're not making a lot of rational decisions. So you actually want fentanyl because it gives you a much better high than any would give you on,
Heroin, for example.
heroin or Dilaudid or whatever. So the reality then becomes, hey, let's sell these pills actually, get the money that we need to get what we really want, what our brain really wants, which is fentanyl or whatever it is. And so it's really, the concept has been completely uh, tainted and it's been taken. And harm reduction is both an intervention and a philosophy. If you look at it as an intervention, it can do a lot of good. I mean, naloxone is harm reduction. Methadone and buprenorphine is a version of harm reduction. I'm in favor of all that. We want those things to be happening. Absolutely. But what we don't want is using it as a philosophy across the whole spectrum, because then you're getting towards drug legalization, promotion, normalization, and a very dangerous idea that you can use drugs safely and you're going to make all kinds of rational decisions. Now, I'm not saying that if you're addicted, you are totally without, agency to make a decision. I'm not saying that, because I actually do think that when you are addicted, incentives do matter. Actually, that's another part of my book is, unlike other brain diseases, the reason addiction is not the same as a traditional classic disease, or certainly classic brain disease. You can't bribe somebody not to have dementia, but you can actually essentially bribe somebody to stop using drugs. I mean, I'm saying that in a very crude way, but you can use incentives for people. And for a lot of those people, even the severely addicted, they will change behavior. So I'm not saying they have no agency, but this idea that they want to move towards something safer, I think, is a very dangerous idea.
When you talk harm reduction, meeting someone where they're at, I think that one of the important things is not only do we meet someone where they're at, but we actually try to help escort them along the way.
That's exactly what we need to do. And I love that you say that. We need more people saying it, because one of the things I say in the book is meet people where they're at, but don't leave them where they're at. And you say it in a better way, essentially escort them to, go with them to a better place. That's what we need to do. But for too long, harm reduction, and I think very purposefully actually, has just stopped at meet people where they're at. In fact, I've heard people, activists, very extreme activists, saying that we should meet people where they're at, and then wait for them to tell us where they want to go. But the reality of addiction is it's so alluring that they want to keep using most of the time. I mean, why would you want to stop? Let's think about it. Why do people use drugs? They use drugs because it feels good. They don't use drugs because it's torture. They don't use drugs because it's like sitting on a bed of needles, even though that's what's happening to their life, by the way. I mean, they're usually they have no idea that that's going on. But it doesn't feel that. It feels great. Bob DuPont, another mentor of mine, who's going to celebrate his 90th birthday next month, and I'm lucky enough to be able to celebrate it with him. He told me and he told everybody that the brain is the most selfish organ in the body. So even when your life is, crumbling, your brain is saying, things are great. I love it. Let's keep going. In fact, let's look for something even better. That's the dangerous part of addiction. And we don't see with other diseases in some ways. And, yes, in some ways with obesity, and obviously food gives you these signals, but the level of signals, the magnitude that the drug signals to your brain versus food or sex or winning an award or, doing a good deed, feeling good about yourself, the level of reward is just off the charts. It's almost an order of magnitude different. And that's where harm reduction that's being tainted can become very, very dangerous, I think.
I'm going to go back to that word. I heard everything you just said. I'm going to go back to that word escort. It doesn't mean I'm going to step ahead and you're going to follow me. It means
Right.
to me, holding hands, walking together.
Sure.
And I'd be willing to bet that, well, of the people of guests I've had on and people I've interviewed, people that I know that are working now, many of them can point to an important person in their life who was there. It wasn't who was there when they decided or helped them make the decision that they wanted to give up drugs. That there was it wasn't just a decision, and it wasn't just an arrest or hitting rock bottom, which rock bottom is death. It's nothing else, by the way.
Right. Right.
But that there was a person as well as a group or something else. So there was an individual. There was connection because the thing
Totally.
that drugs robs us of ultimately is connection.
Completely.
I talk about we have the word. I'll get off my soapbox. I'm interviewing you, but I'm
No, I
on a
love it. No, I love it. Please.
I talk about we use the word when somebody starts to recover, we talk about withdrawal. And I think
Mm,
withdrawal is the wrong word. Withdrawal has been
mm,
going on from the moment they began using drugs because the more you use drugs,
mm,
the more you withdraw from society. Uh,
mm-hmm.
for I would substitute reentry for withdrawal so that
I like that.
someone who's recovering, someone who's beginning the process is beginning reentry. And it's
Yes.
reattaching to reality, and it's reattaching, it's telling their brain to shut off.
I think that's exactly right.
That
I think
greedy
that's
brain,
exactly right.
get off my
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely.
It's if you talk to enough people on a radio show, you catch a few ideas here and there.
No, it's great. I totally agree. That's what we need to be doing. And the other thing is, we obviously need to increase treatment capacity, but we're all, and wait lists are an issue, but I also think waiting for people to realize they have a problem is a big issue. So I was thinking about in the book, and that's why I talk about our friend that we have in common, Judge Alm in Hawaii, who, provides incentives for people to get off of drugs and get help, and real bad disincentives, if they don't. And, that kind of behavior change can really work.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me in reading the book how his idea has expanded. I mean, the number of
Mhm.
judges, the number of drug courts and they're actually getting together to find out what they're doing is at variance with what he initiated and how it might work in their particular circumstance.
Yeah, it has expanded. That's the glass half full, and I like that. And that's the glass half full. The glass half empty version, if I may, not to be negative, is that
Oh,
in
please.
a country like ours, with the wealth and the magnitude of the issue we're now having with our overdose deaths, um, I mean, we should have exponential more number of hope courts and drug courts and other similar interventions implemented within the system. So it's not some boutique specialty thing that takes a judge who happens to have a big heart, who happens to think in an innovative way to get it done. This should be on automatic because we know this stuff works. And the fact that we haven't implemented that in automatic, I mean, I'm not saying it's easy because, it's often a public administration problem more than any other problem at all. Yeah, you're reorienting the way state, local, tribal, federal justice systems talk to each other. I mean, it's a whole thing, and I get it. But I wish we were further along. I'll never forget the last line of the first evaluation of the DC drug court, and the last line that was written there said that this intervention showed that it is actually very easy to change addict behavior. It also showed that it's very difficult to change judge behavior. And what was trying to, I think the point there was, we know what works for the person we're trying to help. It's getting the other people who are in charge and administrating and the ones that are implementing, it's getting them to think differently and to think in new ways. That's the harder part, actually, not getting off meth, which is astounding to think about. But if that's the case, I think there's just so much more we can do and need to keep pushing our lawmakers to do.
There's a maybe you've come across this, probably not, but there's a man named Daniel Coyle who's written
Mm.
several books, but one is called The Little Book of Talent, and then
Mm.
there's a bigger book that accompanies it called The Talent Code. And what he did was he went around to various places all over the world where it could be a tennis academy with two lousy courts in Russia. It could be a voice teacher. It could be a sports academy. Places that for some reason did a better job than any place anywhere else in developing talent. And what he put together were like 50 things that these places have in common, things they do. And I keep thinking we need a little book of talent or a little book of recovery to find out there are places in this country that are doing things well and doing things right, and to find a way to pull them all together, get more information, to have more discussion about what is working, and getting that to more people.
Yeah, no, it's
Maybe that sounds like I'm telling you that you haven't done your job. I don't mean that at all.
no, no, no. We have to keep doing this. Will never end. I mean, that's the thing about that's why one of the reasons I don't like the term drug war. There's many reasons, but a war has a defined end. We're never going to end. We're never going to end educating people. We're never going to end, needing to do that. Re-educating every generation about the harms and re-educating everybody to not do the wrong thing. Re-educating lawmakers. I mean, this is going to be going on. But we do know again what works. I tried to put in the One Nation book a little bit of a not totally non-exhaustive, obviously, listing of some of these, with their stories of prevention,
Yes.
amazing prevention in Iceland, assessment going on in the Cook County, Chicago jail system. I mean, there are different things we can take from around the world. Some more known, like what's happening in Portugal, and I talk about that in the book. About there's, people don't always take the right lessons from Portugal, but there are lessons to be taken. But so that's much more well known, even if it's ill understood. But also, in places like Iceland, in places like Honolulu, in places like Fort Wayne, Indiana. I mean, there are things that are happening that we can keep trying to implement that we need to bring to scale.
Two people, two journalists, Beth Macy and Sam Quinones. Each of them has written two books on addiction in different locales. And in each case, their first book really is horror stories. But their second book begins to name and list people and places where good things are happening. It's no accident.
Yeah,
And
that's what we need to keep doing, and I really respect both those authors. Sam is a friend, does great work. No, we're very lucky to have thinkers like that, in this field.
and you mentioned, and I know we have a friend in common who works for Song for Charlie. There are any number of not even organizations, but things that have been done by parents who have lost children, parents whose families have been affected. There are any number of. My faith is in the grassroots.
I couldn't agree more. I think that there are so many great grassroots folks working on this. Ed and Mary with Song for Charlie, as you say, they do incredible work. I'm such big fans of theirs. I think they're amazing. There are other people too doing this, and we need to keep encouraging them.
Yeah. Do you have any? I'm just. I. Do you have any final thoughts for us? Any words of benediction?
Well, I don't know about that. Just other than this is an ongoing battle, and we know what works, and we shouldn't be taken in by the shiny object, the silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. This is a very complex biobehavioral disorder. It doesn't have one solution. It has to be comprehensive. That includes supply reduction, which, by the way, I think is one of the reasons we're seeing the reduction in overdose. I wish it was because Narcan is everywhere. I don't think that's the case. I think it's because we've seen a change in the supply dynamics in China and elsewhere. But anyway, whatever it is, we need to build from it, and understand that we need that comprehensive approach, and be very wary of people who are out there for our kids and are, against our kids and pushing this addiction for profit narrative. That this is the American way. This is capitalism at its best. It's okay. People can make their own decisions. I think that's a very dangerous line, and I hope we start reversing course on that.
Of course, I asked you the question. I said, let me make this the last question. And it made me think of Bridget Brennan, who I know you
Oh, I
know.
love her.
So
Yeah,
do I. And one thing she does, even though she is the New York City Special Narcotics Prosecutor, she was on the show recently. Um,
love her.
she and her staff do a lot about educating people. There's nothing in her job description
Oh,
that says you should be educating people.
no, I always tell Bridget that I often think about, and I shouldn't, like how sad I'm going to be on the day that she retires. Like, what a loss. And it's many people in New York, the average New Yorker, new to the city or whatever, will not know her, but the impact that she has had and how innovative she is. I was very happy to put her in the book. It's going to be a big loss. And not that she is retiring. I'm not saying she is, but I'm like, we love her so much, and yeah, she's doing way beyond, and we need other people to do that. See, it's taking special people like Bridget, like Steve Alm, the judge in Hawaii, like many other people that I put in the book. But we need to incentivize and kind of make it automatic to have 10,000 more Bridgets and 10,000 more Judge Alms.
There you go. There's a good place to stop.
That's great.
Okay,
Thanks so much, Bill.
you're quite welcome. You've been listening to me to talk with Kevin Sabet, founder of founder of several things, but today we've been talking a lot about Sam.
Smart approaches to marijuana. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me. It was an honor.
You're quite welcome.